Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings NBA video for Friday, March 11th. What we're going to do here is we're going to go after some of the targets that we're going to be looking at to put on our rosters tonight. Some of them are cheap, some of them are a little more in the mid range today. I tried to stay away from some of the expensive options because there are a lot of guys in the expensive options that are in play. So I figure if I could give you a good base of guys in that mid range and low range that you can use to fill out the roster, you guys can decide which of these studs in good spots are the ones you want to put in there for yourselves. So let's call up the slideshow about some of the guys who we think are really overpriced and would be really good guys to help round out your rosters tonight. The four guys we're going to be talking about are Rudy Gay for $6,000 at the small forward spot, Nikola Mirotic at $4,100 at the power forward spot, Thad Young for $6,600 at the power forward spot, and then Costa Koupis as the punt center of the day at $3K. Now, first guy up on this list is Rudy Gay. He's only $6,000, which first thing is struck me as just being a little bit too cheap for him. The 203 total in this game does seem kind of low, but I guess without Boogie Cousins, you got to expect that they're going to tick down the number of points that the Kings are going to score. And I think that's why we see a total of only 203, which is one of the lower ones we've seen for the Kings all season. You know, they're not going to slow it down just because Boogie Cousins is out. This is an up-tempo team that plays fast. And if anything, without Boogie in there, I think they might try to run and gun even a little more. Now, Gay is going to be one of the main beneficiaries of that. He's going to get more shots. The ball's going to be in his hand more often, so his usage rate is going to be higher. And without Boogie in there, he's also going to have to do some more rebounding. So there's a lot of ways that he could have a higher fantasy score than he normally puts up today. He's played 40-plus minutes in each of the last two games and has scored 37.5 fantasy points in both of them. Now, remember, he was out a couple games ago with an injury. Came back, got a tough matchup against San Antonio, so he didn't have a good game there. And those are some of the reasons why we've seen his price start to creep down here. At only 6K, though, he's been averaging over 6X per game since seeing full run again off his injury, the last two games, seeing those 40 minutes. In a game like this today, where he should see that same amount of minutes and also have an uptick in usage because there's no Boogie Cousins, I definitely think that he can get you to a floor of 30 points without a doubt. And I think even at 36, which would be what we need to stay on pace for 300, I think he has the ability to give you upside off that and be one of those value-added players on your team. So for only $6,000, I'm definitely going to have a lot of exposure to Rudy Gay today. Next guy I want to talk about is Nikola Mirotic at 4,100. He's in a game against the Miami Heat, which is a tough matchup. 201 total for his Chicago Bulls team against the Miami Heat today. Now, Mirotic was out for a long time, and since he's returned, he's already put up two good games off of that injury. He had 28 and 39 fantasy points in the last two games. And last game, he finally saw himself play 28 minutes. So it looks like he's getting back to that 25 to 35-minute range that we saw him in earlier in the year. And remember, earlier in the season, this is a guy who was routinely putting up 30 to 40 fantasy points. So if you got a guy that has a 40 fantasy point upside, if he plays 32, 33 minutes today, he gets you 40 fantasy points. That's going to be 10x value. Even at the price that he's at now of only 4,100, if you get over 25 fantasy points out of him, you should be in a really good spot getting over 6x out of a guy that's that cheap. That'll give you some salary savings to go up and get some of the studs. Now, remember, with 28 and 39 in his last two games, 6x here would be like 24.5. So he's basically given you about 7x value as a floor in the last two games since he started playing some big minutes. And he's not even all the way back up to the number of minutes that we saw before he got injured. There's still no Jimmy Butler, so the Chicago team does need offense, and that's something that Mirotic can provide. He fills up a stat sheet across the board. In the last two games, he's scored in all 6 of the categories that are positive scoring categories for DraftKings. He gave you about a dozen points or so. He hit a couple three-pointers, grabbed a few rebounds, had an assist or two, and wound up with a steal or a block in each game as well. So if you're going to have a guy at only $4,000 who's going to be seeing increased minutes and can fill up a stat sheet completely across the board, I think he's still a little bit too cheap and definitely should be somebody that we look at for our rosters tonight. Next guy I want to talk about is Thad Young at 6,600. He's got a big 211-point total against the lowly 76ers today, one of the higher totals and lower spreads on the day, so I think it's a good game to target. 76ers have given up a lot of big games to opposing big men so far this year, and that has the revenge factor, on his side. He's averaged 20 and 10 in the last two meetings against the 76ers this year. I think he's going to be low owned by the game log crowd as well. If you look at his game log, he had a tough game last time out against Toronto, but Toronto has a very good defense. So, you can kind of give him a little bit of an excuse for that. The game before that, he sat out, but he didn't sat out with an injury. That was the game last Saturday when the Nets were coming off of an overtime game, and they had to play a back-to-back. So they played a back-to-back after an overtime game. Both Thad Young and Brook Lopez were, sat out for rest. So it's not like he's coming off an injury or anything. He's completely healthy. They just rested him because he played, 40-something minutes in an overtime game the night before, and they were playing on back-to-back nights. So I think Thad Young is going to be somebody who people checking the game logs are not going to be all that thrilled to put in their lineup. But remember, you got a weak 76ers team that he's going up against interior players here. His price is down to only $6,600. And we've seen Thad put up 36 to 45 fantasy points quite often lately. So I do think that this price is a little bit depressed for him. I think the spot is really nice for him. And I think the ownership will be down, which makes him a really good tournament play and somebody that I'm going to have a lot of exposure to as well. Now, the chalk play on the day here is probably going to be Kosta Koufos at $3,000. It's a 203 total versus Orlando. His team is a 8 or 9 point underdog, depending on what site you look at right now. Remember, Boogie Cousins is sitting out, got in a shouting match with Coach George Karl yesterday. Karl suspended him for a game. And Koufos has been in this situation before. He started in 9 games this year with Boogie Cousins not playing. In the 9 games that Boogie has been out this year, Koufos has given us 23, 31, 36, 28, 14, 20, 30, 19, and 30 fantasy points. For a guy that's 3K, I'm not going to say 6X is the floor. So that game of 19 and that game of 23, the game of 20, those are still not games that I would really be happy with out of a guy I played 3K for. If I'm paying 3K for a guy, I want him to get me at least 25 fantasy points. If he gets me 25 fantasy points, I think he's going to be worth it for you because that's over 8X value, and it also gives you extra money to spend up on some studs at some other positions, or maybe even upgrade 2 or 3 different positions to a higher scale guy than a lower mid-tier kind of guy that you would have to use instead. So at 25 fantasy points, he's done that for us in 5 of the 9 games that he's been in there as a starter. Games of 30, 36, 28, 30, and 30 would be fine here. Again, if he's able to get you 30 points, that's 10X value for a guy at minimum price. Everybody knows that Boogie's out today. It's not a secret, so I don't think you're going to get Koufos low owned. But I do think you're going to need to use him in there. I think people are going to try to use him in order to fit in a second or a third superstar. So I think the way to kind of diversify your rosters is use Koufos, but instead of going and trying to take 2 or 3 superstars, maybe try to take a guy in the 7 to 8K range at every position. It's not really going with a mid-range roster because 7 or 8K guys is actually usually the sweet spot where guys are under-owned. People either pay up for guys at 10K or try to go down and find some $5,000 or $6,000 guys to round out the roster. We do have a couple guys in that 6K price range that make a lot of sense today. So you could use those 2 guys along with Koufos and still have enough money left over to go get 5 other guys on your roster in the 7K range. What that would say to me is if you get one more punt play, like maybe a Mirotic in there, you'll be able to fit in some of those 8K guys like a Rajon Rondo or a Drew Holiday, maybe some of the guys at the other positions who are, not the number 1 option at every position, but, a guy like a Hassan Whiteside or a Brook Lopez who's in that like $7,500 to $8,000 range. I think a lot of those guys are going to go a little bit under-owned because of their pricing today. And you can have a roster filled with those guys that do have upside and have the ability to score 30 or 40, 50 fantasy points for you. And if you can get them at low ownership because you used Koufos, I think that's going to be the way to differentiate yourself from everybody who tries to use Koufos to pay up for Durant and Westbrook and Steph Curry on the day, which is usually what winds up happening when we have a solid 3K punt. Remember, today, with Koufos basically being a lock that you have to put in your roster, it's kind of like you're playing 7-on-7. So if you're playing in some of these big tournaments, you got to go a little bit in a different direction, especially knowing that, there's going to be more overlap if everybody has Koufos. A lot of those rosters are going to wind up being built the same if they all target the same, high-price studs. So that's a little tip for the day for all you guys out there, who follow our videos. So that basically sums it up. Those are the 4 guys that I'm looking at today. That I'm going to have a lot of exposure to in my rosters to be able to have enough money left over to go up and pay for some of these studs, or maybe pay for 4 of those other guys on top of these 4 that are in that 7 to 8K price range that, tend to go a little bit under-owned for the talent that they kind of have. So thank you guys for joining us here at rotocurve.com. This is Benny Ricciardi. You can follow me over on Twitter at BennyR11 or follow us over on Twitter at RotoCurve. Make sure you guys subscribe to our RotoCurve link over on YouTube as well. The more subscribers that we have, you guys will be able to get the videos as soon as they come out. We put these out every day. We got about a month or 2 left of NBA season. Starting at the beginning of the next month, we're going to be bringing a ton of MLB content for you. Make sure to check out RotoCurve Radio over on the rotocurve.com homepage. We started a podcast network where you'll see guys like myself and Josh and, all the other contributors who are there come on and kind of give you some of their ideas about, how to build rosters for MLB, how to build rosters for NBA, things you should be looking at, some of the changes in the rules and how it'll affect our gameplay. Basically everything you need to be a profitable player. Like we say over here, we want to help you guys get over that curve, make you a profitable player so you can see how much fun daily fantasy is like the rest of us do. So thank you guys for joining us. And as always, stay classy, DFS.